Hello, I am Mudita, and welcome back to Satisfactory. I'm working towards building an electronics factory to take care of many of the new parts in this phase and the MAM. I currently have a temporary plastic and rubber setup, and it has served me well so far. I'm going to replace it with a permanent factory that will take 300 crude oil and turn it into 400 plastic and 500 rubber. This will be more than enough for my dimensional depots and the upcoming electronics factory. I want to thank you all for being so understanding about the last video, and all the comments of encouragement are very heartwarming and appreciated. If it doesn't light my PC on fire, this video should be available in 1440p for those of you interested. The last video finished right over there with that train station and the factory making the copper sheets. Taking a look at the map, the majority of my factories are basically in this area right here. I've done some exploring out in the desert and down into the grassy fields, but haven't built anything. Logistically, the three locations I could use for this plastic and rubber would be right where my hub is, because there is still more oil available here. But I don't want to make this area too crowded unless I have to, so I'm going to skip that. The Spire Coast has a ton of oil, and I would just never really run out. But I'm also not going huge this playthrough, and so what I'm thinking is coming down here to the west coast. There's two pure, two normal nodes, and then eventually there's also an oil well. My plan is to dedicate this whole area to just plastic and rubber production for the rest of the playthrough. The first step would be building more trains. So I did get a little bit of a head start. I already had this intersection to get the train to go out to that part of the desert, and I had it out to about here. And I decided, well, might as well just get a little bit of a head start on this. And I built another three-way intersection. And I'm hoping that it's not too close to that one. The downside with having two intersections this close together would be the signals. So let me show you. So with all of these, we want to do a path signal in and a block signal on the way out. And so instead of putting the path signal right here, because that's where the junction actually is, it covers up the sign and it just doesn't really fit with the whole theme of things nearly as well. So thankfully, you can actually place it farther back if you want to. And so that's what I've been doing, is putting the path signal a little bit farther back. And then the block signals would be right here. And then I need another block signal right here. Oh, that's on the wrong side. There we go. And if I follow this along, and now we have a block signal. So I need this one right here because it's in between the two. The reason I bring this up is the way that the path signals work. The difference between the path signal and the block signal is right now this entire intersection is one block. It'll be easier if I do this. If I bring out a block signal, we can see the entire intersection is one block. If all of those path signals were block signals instead, that would mean that only one train could enter this area at a time. Now, the advantage to using path signals is that if two trains aren't going to collide, they can both enter this intersection. Meaning that since I'm using right-hand drive, if a train was going along this outside track, and a train was coming along this inside track, and then a third train was moving along this track, all three trains would be able to enter this intersection at the same time because none of their paths would intersect, causing a crash. But let's say, for example, the train that's coming from this side going on this section was making a left. And so now that train coming from this way wouldn't be able to because they would both collide at some point. And so for a situation like that, it becomes a first come, first serve situation. But the way the path signals figure it out is by the block signal before it. So if we zoom up here, for this example, the train that's traveling on this line, this path signal basically gets activated when the train crosses this block signal. But we can go around all of the different path signals and they're all going to default to red. All three of them. So by default, all of the path signals are red, which means that if you have a train traveling along this way, it's going to see that this is a red signal, even though that this one is a green. And so somewhere right about here, it's going to start to slow down. Once it passes the block signal, This pass signal would turn green if it's the first one, and then the train could speed back up again. But until the pass signal turns green, it thinks it needs to stop there. So at the distances I've set all of these apart from each other, one of the things I can do to speed up some of the traffic in certain areas, I can actually just delete this one. And now the length of track in between the block and the pass signal is so long, the train won't really slow down at all, unless someone beats it to that intersection. And even if it does, it's got a pretty long path that hopefully it'll be able to start picking up speed before it ever comes to a complete stop. I bring this up because I can't really do that in a spot like this where I've only got one section of block signals in between the two intersections. So I do have a little bit of a fear that this could be a spot of congestion in the future. But I'm hoping worst case scenario, I could add another intersection, because what could go wrong with that? And I could cut that one through that little corridor and meet up with this over here. So any of the trains coming from that direction could hopefully just avoid this whole thing if they're going just around to the grassy fields or something. But the thing I do have to save me is that these are stackable. So if things do start to get crowded, I can just add a whole nother set of tracks. And with the Blueprint Auto Connect, it should be really easy to do. So here's my plan. All of the oil is right out here on those islands. I'm thinking this huge area of open water would be a great spot to put the train station. I'm not going to finish the train station today because honestly I just don't know how big it's going to end up getting. So unfortunately the train station is going to be kind of bare bones. But the plastic and rubber factory, we'll get that all sorted out by the end of today. So I want this line to run over to the train station. And then this one is just going to follow the coastline most likely, probably go through that arch. And that'll be the way it gets out to the grassy fields and continues the giant world loop. I'll work on that part later, so for now, let's just continue out the track. So I've tried a bunch of different ways, and I think this is just probably the easiest. Then I just need to copy the blueprint, put it in Blueprint Auto Connect, make sure it's facing the right way, and then nudge it just the right spot. There we go. And then I think I'm going to turn this so that I'm back onto the world grid, at least for the alignment wise. It's still going to be off in these directions by probably some random amount. But that's the beauty of doing it this way, is making a curve from off the grid onto the grid is much easier now. Let me clear out some of this riffraff, and definitely, I know I've mentioned it a few times, but if you crouch, even while you're using the jetpack, they won't open up. I can even jump on it and shoot it, and it won't open up. Oh, it's so good. I love it so much. Just makes the hatchers so easy with the jetpack. I did decide to make that turn, but I decided to do it actually as the very first section right after the intersection. And that way I have just a nice long straight section here. So here's my thinking, the way I want to lay this out. I have no idea if this is going to work well or if this is going to create me nightmares. I'm not an expert in trains. That track, like I mentioned, is going to go around there and it's going to hug the coastline and go out that way. But if in the future I build something in the grassy fields and it needs plastic and rubber, that means it would come all the way over here and then into the train station, and that's silly. So if something's coming from the grassy fields, I want an easier way to do it. And obviously just going right through this archway just makes too much sense. And it's lined up with the waterfall. It's going to look great. So I want one track that's going to basically meet up with that one over there. So there's one thing I need to avoid, but let me show you with actually placing these tracks. So the way I kind of got things spaced out here, I want this intersection to be fairly short. And if you keep everything kind of the same distances, it just makes everything so easy. So this is going out 3 foundations, and really because there's 2 of them. Then this goes out 3 foundations from this middle spot. And then we've got 3 foundations to the train platform. We'll just put that there for now. Alright, so let's go ahead and just place the ending track section here. It's nice to be able to just work with a straight section of track. Alright, so that's how they're going to enter, and then I'll build the train stations. But now we just do the normal 3-way, so this is nice and easy. And then we just connect this to the sides. So here to here, here to there. Wait, that went too far. There to there. I want to make sure that this path doesn't get prioritized in some way. And so I can just make sure it doesn't by just not connecting some of the tracks. So if I don't want trains coming from this direction to cut through here to go out into the desert, I can just not have a track that's connecting that. And so now the only option is for trains going from here to go straight into the train station. Because there will be another path that goes out that way, and I would rather them take that direction. And so same thing for going this direction. I don't want trains going from the desert to cut through here, so I'll just delete that track. And now this should make sure that I don't have any weird traffic issues by the wrong trains coming through here and creating unnecessary traffic. I hope. The only way that they would is if they thought going into a train station and all the way through was somehow faster, and that should not be the case. As far as the train stations go, I think the first step is I just want to find out where these tracks are going to go. I think the way I want to lay these out is have the entrance go this way, and the train stations will be facing south basically, and then they'll exit and then come out that way. This line comes out to here. That means this is the closest I can put the first train station. And since I'm still a ways off from teleporters, I think the very first one is going to be my train station. And that just gives me something to kind of work off of, and I don't need real freight platforms, and so it shouldn't be too bad. I do want to give the train enough space, but I don't want to waste too much space, so let's just put it on that line, I guess. Yeah, probably something like that. Maybe I'll move it a little bit farther, we'll see. But for this one, I'll just do empty catwalks. Or else it looks funny when it's just the train station and then everything else is just huge train stations with all these platforms. So the one thing I should have checked is how close I can put this. So if I want this track to come all the way out to the edge, that means I should go back 1, 2 foundations. From there, I can make a nice short 90-degree turn. And then I'd be able to make a 90-degree turn back into this spot. So this right here is probably actually where I should put the train station. All right, so let me move that over. Yeah, I've got 2 train stations. Got my personal one and then the very first freight platform. And then I've got plenty of space to add some more. Oh yeah, and then that floating track over there. So I decided to rework some things to see if maybe I could lessen the traffic even more. And this is what it turned into. I need to be so far zoomed out. Let me get to a better spot. All right, so I think I made it so there should be, minimal traffic. Or at least that's the thinking here. All right, so for trains coming from the desert in this direction, they're coming along this line. And then they branch off here. And then the very first freight platform would be the first left that they can make. And then if I add more, then they just branch off there. Go through the train station, and then on their way back, they come down here. But instead of having this line cross over, because I have plenty of clearance and not even all the way down to the ocean floor here, I can just have the locomotive run underneath these train tracks, and then they don't have to cross over, meaning no trains will have to slow down or stop. And then for trains coming this direction, they would come this way. They go into the train station and then they go out. And then this is where they merge up with this one. And then they go to whichever train station they're trying to go to. And then the same thing goes, except for this one, then they would turn in and go out this way. The only one that's different is my train station. If I'm coming from this direction, I'm going to skip through that one and then cut all the way in. And that way, if there's a train following me, once I cross here, it's just able to go where it needs to go, and I'm out of its way. Unfortunately, if a train is coming this way, I'll still stop it for a second. But none of my schedules should be so tight that me showing up every once in a while should throw anything off. But I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. I think it should function pretty well. Should is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. Before I work on the plastic and rubber factory, I want to extend this, and just kind of finish this whole loop. I feel like I might as well, because I'm sure sooner than later I'm going to need a train that goes out to the grassy fields, and I'd rather just have this kind of complete. So I'm going to extend this. Well, I think at this point I should probably bring the other line over. So let me head over there real quick. And then with this one, I'm going to do the same trick I've been using. So I go usually about 5. With this one, yeah, I might as well just make it even. So we'll go out 6. And then I'll lock it in place, nudge it down 1. Switch this to a 1 meter, and then just change the angle here. Let's see. Alright, so if we bring that out 6. Blueprint auto connect, and then snap it to this one. Nudge it down using the good old jetpack. Let's take a look. And now I can extend it out. Oh, that's about as far as we can go. Okay, now we can just kind of play around with the angle. Doesn't look too bad. It would be nice if I could just miss those trees, but I may have to cut down that close one. And then as far as the angle here, yeah, it's looking pretty good. We go over just a little bit, we missed that tree too. Curve still looks good. All right. So yeah, that's basically how I've been placing my trains, which means that they are nowhere close to being on grid, even if you start on grid. But it just gives you so much freedom. And by doing it this way, I know that the height is going to stay on grid. And so getting these things back on grid is really pretty easy, because I can just zoop something up like this. That's probably a little too tall. And so that is on the world grid. And then I'm able to just snap this on grid. And obviously this angle isn't going to connect, but you get the picture. Just letting the tracks do the curve for you makes it really easy to be able to go off the world grid and then back on. And this is where I'm at so far. So this is how I bring an intersection together. What I did was I basically kind of found the point where they would meet by just zooping out this one a whole bunch, and then basically just knowing that this one can make that curve. And so once I found the point I wanted to work off of, this right here is my intersection. And so I did the same thing I did over at that intersection. I just zooped out 4 foundations here, and then we've got 4 foundations. So this gap right here is where one of those will go. And then one will go here. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. And I'm going to go out another 4 here. And this will make another one of my 3-way intersections. Alright, so at least for this part, I can use the blueprint auto connect. And, oh, that's right. Okay, so that distance is actually too far. So the unfortunate part, we're just going to have to put this in default. So I'm going to need to throw one more in here, but I'm going to redo all of them so that the gaps are a little bit more even. But with blueprints, it's nice and easy. So let's go ahead and place one there. With this one, I should be able to use the blueprint auto connect. And I want to make sure I'm lining up the right one so that everything is spaced out the right way. And we'll just place this one here with default. Alright, so with all 3 there, now I should be able to just connect all my tracks like normal. So these ones just go straight across. And then all I need to do is clean up my temporary foundations. Nice and organized. Now I can probably do the same thing I did with that intersection, because any train coming this direction should have already branched off and gone to plastic and rubber. So I shouldn't need either one of these, because even if a train was going this way first and then they were leaving to the desert, they should be using that exit, so they wouldn't be even leaving this way. So I think I should be able to just delete those. And if I'm wrong, I can always come back and add them pretty easily. And there is my ridiculous train network loop. So just for full disclosure, the pack utility mod finally got updated, and so I do have the ability to fly. However, I don't want to use it that much. For me personally, it actually takes away a little bit of the fun and the enjoyment. But there are places where it makes my life a whole lot easier. A lot of the times doing the final touches on decorating, especially on the outside of the factory. I don't have the hover pack yet. It's certainly cheating, but in a couple places, it saves a lot of time and effort. The main use for me is on the content creator side, I love the new photo mode, and the great thing is I can still use it. It just leaves me floating in the air now. But the problem with it is it does still have a bit of a limited range. So for looking at things like the whole train network, it's just really hard to get to the right spot and still be able to get everything in range. So for things like this, it's really nice to be able to show off the big picture of the whole thing. But like I said, I'd rather not use it most of the time because I did just automate just a ton of liquid biofuel. And if I use fly all the time, then it really just doesn't give me an incentive to package the better fuel in the future for my jetpack or even use the hover pack. So I'm going to try not to use the fly very much, but I do have it, and every once in a while I'm sure I'll use it. Especially because I like being able to put the Pioneer in shots, and it looks way better when he's standing on something than if I'm just T-posing in the air or something. Now let's talk about the actual factory. Like I've mentioned, this is going to take 300 crude oil. I'm going to turn all of it into heavy oil residue, and then all of that into fuel using the diluted packaged fuel recipe. With 800 fuel, the way the recycled plastic and rubber recipes work is you take the opposite of what you're trying to make, you add an equal amount of fuel, and now you just double the amount. So as you can see, for the plastic, I'm going to take 400 rubber, 400 fuel, and it'll make 800 plastic. Same thing for the rubber, just the opposite. But the trick is, I need half of it to make the other half. So I'm not making 1600 plastic and rubber in total. It's only 800 between the two of them for those recipes. If this is confusing, it'll make a little bit more sense when I show you the machines. I get 200 polymer resin as a byproduct for making all of that heavy oil residue. I'm going to mix that with water and turn it into an extra 100 rubber. And if we head right over here, I think we should be able to see it. We've got a couple different oil nodes. So these two right here are normal nodes. That one's up here, that one's up here, and that we don't get access to until next phase. That's 1800 oil I have access to. I don't want to use the diluted packaged fuel recipe for all of this, and so we're going to keep this one small. I'm sure I'll need more plastic and rubber later on down the line, but then I'll be able to use blenders, and we can streamline a couple more things and cut out all those packagers. But the beauty of using packagers is we get to go vertical, which means I can keep things a little bit more compact. I'm going to use that very first normal node, and I'm going to have it come somewhere along here, and I think I'm just going to keep this very first factory nice and close to the train station. So right about here, I want to see if I can squeeze in this entire thing. The oil extractor is placed, and I've got my path for where the oil pipe is going to go. This is just a guide for me to place my blueprints. It's just the simple blueprint that'll carry the pipe and some power over here. And that is going to run along this path all the way to the first floor of the new factory. It was a bit of trial and error to fit all of the water extractors in because I don't have a ton of space to work with. It always seems like a lot of space until you start putting machines in there and then you realize it's not a lot of space. Happens to me every time. The way this all breaks down, every single water extractor is going to be overclocked to put out 200 meters cubed. I need 800 total water for just the fuel, and then I need another 200 for the polymer resin. Now, normally I like to put all of the packagers on the same floor as the water extractors because then I just don't need pumps. Lifts are just so much easier to work with. And it looks like I have, some space down here. But if we take a look at the packager and we package water, even if we completely overclock this, it can only do 150 for each packager. Meaning at a minimum for every single water extractor, I need 2. But I don't think I want to try to cram in 10 packagers down here. There is some space, but cramming 10 packagers and all of the belt work just doesn't seem fun. So instead, I'll use a couple pumps. Not the end of the world. So now I'm going to build up a second floor, so I think I'll just go up just a few. Really just enough. Let's see. So if I zoom that one out, yeah, that would cut right through it. So we'll probably go up this high. So we'll add a floor up to here. This will do all of the oil processing. All right, now I have a second floor, so let's get some machines placed. The first step is let's find the center. That's usually easiest to work with, so 13. Right here is our center point. So this is where the oil is going to run down. And let's go ahead and just start with some refineries. Probably should have turned this into a blueprint, but we're just going to freehand this. So I want to give myself a little bit of space, and hopefully this will be enough. So the way we're going to do this is they're all going to get alternated. So we're going to do one facing that way and then one facing this way. Let's go ahead and set some recipes. So the very first one, we'll be doing the heavy oil residue. I'm going to be making 400 across 6 machines. Well, just 2 power shards. And let's go ahead and paint that one purple. And the other one will be using the diluted packaged fuel recipe. And this is going to be making 800 across 6 machines. This one needs all 3. And we can go ahead and color this one good old standard orange for the fuel. So that is 1 pair, and I just need 6 pairs. So we'll do that one, and then this one. Just make sure that they're facing the right directions each time. And nice and easy. And then I just mirror it on this side, and I'll have 6 of each. Alright, so let me show you how this is going to work. The crude oil is going to come this way. And so we're just going to place a pipeline junction in front of each of the heavy oil residue, but not the other ones. And those will get connected to oil. The oil gets turned into heavy oil residue. So for that, we just come to the other side. And then we just connect these 2 with a pipe. Color it purple for the heavy oil residue, because this one is going to put out 66 2/3. This one needs 66 2/3. And now I need 133 1/3 packaged water. Normally, I try to avoid these numbers, but this will all work out. Alright, so let's go ahead and connect all of these, because there's one last thing I need to work on. So this is going to output the polymer resin, and for that, I am just going to actually collect it all underneath, and that's how that's going to get to where it's supposed to go. So we can basically just kind of forget about these for now. I'll take care of those a bit later, but those will be easy. These all need that packaged water. So I've got 3 of them, and each need 133 1/3. So it's 400. And as we've already gone over it, that means that I'm going to need 4 of these packagers. So the way I'm going to lay this out is kind of off of the load balancing. And so let's go ahead and work backwards, and just because I think I'm going to be kind of tight on space, we'll just put this nice and close. These need 133 1/3, so that's going to be marked 3 for all of these. Alright, so from here, I just need to plug in 400 packaged water. Alright, so let's just tentatively place that right there. Grab my packager. I could get these a little bit closer, but I can't get these on the half foundation. I think we're just going to go right here. I may end up having to extend this by 1 foundation just so I can add a walkway, but I should be able to get all the machines to fit on this platform. So if I've got 2 there, this isn't a splitter. That needs to be a merger anyways. So we'll place a merger right here, and we can get that nice and close. And then this merger will go right here. And then we can basically do the same thing on this side. Alright, let's set the recipe. So packaged water, I need each one of these to do 100. So we'll copy and paste. There we go, and now we can just copy the whole thing and put it on this side. All of these need a Mark II. So 100 into each of these mergers, 200 into the middle one, so 400 into there. And there's our load balancing. So on this side, it's still not too bad. What we need to do is join the 2 together with a pipe. So with vertical nudging, how much easier now? Just go up 2. And it probably needs to be actually a little bit closer. Alright, in good old straight mode. Alright, let's go. So we'll just make sure we get these all blue. And there we go. So from here, probably that should be enough to do any of the belt work for that. And put it back to horizontal vertical. And there we go. But this is going to be a closed loop, so I am missing the empty canisters, but I kind of need to figure out where everything is going. But with such a small system, I won't even need containers of empty canisters. What I should be doing is every once in a while, I'm just going to pull out a stack of 300 canisters. Every once in a while when I remember, I'll just pull out a few more stacks, and that'll be more than enough for this whole thing. So let me finish that up and mirror it onto this side, and then we can move on to the next floor. And there we go. 800 fuel in a pretty compact area. And I could have even shrank it more. I gave myself more space down the middle than I really needed. But that's alright. I kind of like being able to see everything. I don't need to make things too cramped. And now we move on to the third and final floor. For this one, I did decide to make a blueprint. Refineries really make you look small, don't they? I don't think this is the most compact way you could lay this out. I think if you wanted to move the packager to be kind of like on the outside here, especially if you turned it sideways, I think it would probably overall take up less space doing it that way. However, I like the way this one looks. So let's go through it real quick. The first refinery we have here is doing the recycled rubber. It's going to take 66 2/3 plastic, same amount of fuel, double that amount into rubber. Same thing on this side, just the parts are flipped, but same amount of fuel. So this is going to be taking that familiar 133 1/3 packaged fuel and turning it into regular fuel and giving me the empty canisters. And that amount is exactly what each one of the refineries below is outputting. So that's the fuel part, but they each need either the plastic and rubber. And the way these work is they feed each other. And so in the past, what I did was just have them set up in basically the opposite direction from each other. And then that way you just put like a splitter here, and then that way half of it just goes over to here and vice versa, although you probably want these in the opposite direction. But I wanted to do it a little bit differently, and it just created some fun belt work. The output goes into a splitter, and then that goes around this side, around, and plugs into the plastic. And then we're doing the exact same thing with the plastic, except for this one is getting lifted up so that they don't run into each other. And then this one drops down and goes into this machine. So there is one major flaw to the way this whole thing works. Once it's up and running, it works perfect. However, if you don't have any product to start with, it won't ever start. Now, I could do all sorts of things to use the polymer resin to get it all sorted, but there's just an easier way, especially when it's a small factory like this. So don't worry, I've got that part taken care of. So half of the output of each of these refineries is feeding the other refinery. And then I've got the other half to do whatever I want with. And so out of here and here, I'll have my final products. And the reason they don't have the mergers and the belts connected to this last section already is because I want them to share. So down here, they ran this way. But because of the way that I built this factory and the dimensions of it, it's longer this way than it is that way. And so for this floor, the middle of it is going to run perpendicular. We're going to run it this way, which only makes the belt work a little bit more complicated. All right, so we've got 10 foundations. So this right here is the very center. And yeah, you know what? I think that should be plenty of space. So we'll have one there, and then we'll have one on the opposite side, facing this way. There we go. And that way, what I can do is grab mergers. And from right here in the middle of basically all four of these, I'm going to place one. And then you could place three, or you could just nudge this one up. Really up to you. So all of these need to get plugged into the side because there's going to be another one. So we'll have a row of all of these mergers going this way. And so plastic merges in like that. And then the rubber comes in like this. And that's how all 400 of them get grouped up. So we just need to place a few more of these. And then just a couple mergers right in the middle of each one. And then we can get it all grouped together. Now, as far as the packagers go, this is going to be pretty easy too. Want to keep this out of the way, so the incoming belt is just going to be here. And then same thing with the outgoing belt. Although with this one, I can give it a little bit more space if I want to, so I might even bring them all the way back to here. These can go there. That needs to be Mark 3. And now if we just drop below, and now we can kind of figure out how to finish this loop. So this one, and then the other ones that I need to place, the outside ones are going to be the empty canisters. These inside 6 are where I need to plug up the diluted packaged fuel. And because pretty much everything is here on the ceiling, I think that is just going to be the easiest thing to do. Well, some of these are just going to line up just right next to each other, I think. So some of these are probably going to be nice and easy. And then the other ones will be a little bit more spread out, so probably have to place it like that. And then just find the closest one, make sure it's Mark 3. And then we'll just use good old straight mode. So for some of these, well, yeah, like that one, well, we definitely don't want these to clip into each other. So for some of these, we'll just have to go the opposite direction. So that's basically what I'm going to do. But thankfully, I just need to pair up one of these refineries with one of these floor holes. Alright, and then for the empty canisters, and the way these work is I need 400 in total for this. But I don't really want things to cross over here. So what I'm going to do is things a little bit differently. Since these are going up to 3 things up top, I'm going to place a splitter here on the ceiling on the very center one. And then on each of the outside ones, I am just going to place a merger. And I hope that's lined up. Good chance I'm going to have to move that one. And now I just need to take my lift, and each one of these are getting that 133 and third, and that's not lined up. Alright, so I need Mark 3 because each one of these are putting out 133 and a third empty canisters. Oh, I made that a merger, but I need this one. The middle one needs to be a splitter. So we'll make that one a splitter. So that one is going to get split in half. And that'll go there, and the other half goes to the other one. Because if I have 133 and a third, and now instead of just one, I have basically 1.5 on each side. So I split that one in half. So now there's 200. So with this 200, we can just go ahead and drop it down. And then I can just add a splitter here. And 100 goes here. 100 goes here. Just need to plug in the 200 there. Now, normally, I don't like to do my systems like this. What I prefer to do is to basically have one packager or even a set of packagers assigned to one refinery. And then that way, this refinery feeds into the next project, and then those empty canisters come right back to the same set of packagers, and those canisters just stay within their own closed loop. By doing it this way, what I've done is now all of the canisters are more or less shared. If I were to scale this system up, I would probably do the empty canister loop a little bit differently, but thankfully with such a small system, this will work out just fine. I didn't get things quite lined up right, so I had to reposition them a little, but that is the beauty of blueprints. So now things are in the right spot, and they all kind of fit together, and I've got all of my chaos of the beltwork on the ceiling here. But like I said, it's really just taking one refinery, plugging it up into a packager, and then all of the empty canisters, the middle one gets split, this one gets 1.5 of them, and then feeds into these packagers to make that package water. And then as you can see, I totally planned this from the get-go and didn't completely forget the 2 refineries that I needed for the polymer resin. Nope, definitely didn't forget these, and just added onto the side of the building. So like I said, all of that polymer resin is just getting grouped up on the very bottom floor. So 3 of them get grouped together, that sends it into the middle. Those 3 get grouped together. Right here, I've got my 200 polymer resin, comes right over here, feeds into the splitter, and then each one of these get their 100 polymer resin. And then this one just needed its own water pipe as well. Thankfully, the water pipes were really easy. I just needed 1 pump, and so I just kind of spaced them out because there was plenty of space. Just run them off to the side and then up to the ceiling to avoid the rest of the belts. And yeah, nice and easy. With the amount that they're going, I probably could have gotten away with just Mark 1 pumps, but I like the way the Mark 2 looks better. And the difference is 2 to 4 megawatts, I think. So across 5 pipes, it's worth the extra 10 megawatts to me. 2 last major parts, and then the decorations. I just need to run the oil pipe down here, and then connect everything to power. So when I have a factory like this, what I normally do is just run this floor just straight onto the ceiling, because even though they've got a decent amount of head lift, I don't think it looks weird having the power connections go straight up to the roof. But for me, the packagers are just so much shorter that I'm not crazy about this look. So for the packagers, I'm going to end up running those just through the machine underneath. So I usually just lock it in place with H, and then I come back up here, and then I just kind of nudge it into place until the power cable disappears. Yep, looks good to me. So I'll connect the power underneath, and then I'll do the same thing for the top floor, because normally I like to do some sort of windows or something. So the top floor almost always has its power run underneath it, just to kind of keep them out of the way. I've got my elevator in place now, so I can go in between the 3 different floors. And I want to take my plastic and rubber from the top floor, bring it down to basically the ocean floor, and then it's going to go underneath the train station, because that's where I'll have my logistics area. And the great thing with lifts is, as long as you're ending in a floor hole, you can make them infinitely long. So normally it would only go to there, but once I look at this floor hole, I can bring it all the way down. So that one right there is my plastic line. So the other one is for my rubber. Now with this one, the reason I already have these attached to here is I've noticed that if I didn't already have these attached, when I add my vertical merger, which I think is going to be right there, I should probably place it in the right spot. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we place this one here, and this is where the extra 100 rubber is going to get plugged into the rest of this line. And that's going to get sent down here. So I noticed that if you place a vertical merger and this is just an empty floor hole, that when you do attach the lift, it just doesn't actually connect. So my suggestion would be to just place most of it, and then just place the vertical mergers as the last thing you're going to do. And I'm sure some of you are thinking, why are you doing this? You're going to crash your whole system because you're trying to put 500 on a 480 belt. And that is a good observation. However, I decided to do some load balancing up here, and I am going to split off 25 of each, and they are going to go into my own storage with dimensional depots. The amount that's going to be going downstairs to the train station is going to be 375 for each of these. And it would have been much easier to just not split it one last time and just send 50 to storage of each of those, and then send 350 to the train station, because the numbers are just easier to work with. I really don't think I even need 25 per minute, but it seemed like a good number to split off. So this kind of load balancing is really easy. It just looks chaotic because there's just 2 belts on top of each other doing the exact same thing, but it's just getting split in half once. So there's 200, here's 200, split it in half again, 100, 100, split it in half again, 50, 50, and then one last time. There's the 25, and there's the 25 that heads on over here. And then I just wanted to make it simple, so I've just got my smart splitter, and these are set to any, and then overflow. The only way I could really make that work then is by just putting the dimensional depots on all of them. And now I've got a whole 3 left, but it means I never have to come back and upgrade this thing later. I got my pipeline built. I used my simple pipe bus blueprints again and got that laid out, so they just come right along here. And that's where they plug into the factory. I think the factory is pretty much set now. Still needs power. Everything's still red. But now I'm on to the decorating part. The save is currently at about 125 hours and 50 minutes. Let's see where we're at when we get back. We are now at 128 hours on the dot. Looks so much bigger from the ground. Let's take a quick little tour. So what I did with this one is I wanted to keep things rather simple. So I used a lot of just basic walls and just kind of split them up. So most of the windows are only 2 foundations wide, and then they get split by another wall. And the walls themselves, I figured, were pretty busy. Being the triple frame window, you have a whole lot of these, and it makes the whole side of the building look pretty busy, just all on their own. but they're missing that depth. It just looks really flat with just concrete walls and just the windows. And so I came up with this just real little blueprint. All it is a half foundation, just a 1 meter on the top of the bottom. And then right down the middle, I've just got some square signs. And that's it. It's real simple. But what that did is, if I just delete some of these, is these are right where the floor is. So that right there is the foundation. Then in blueprint mode, we can just add these back. And then same with that floor. So that right there is where all the foundations are. Where there aren't foundations, I use the walls. But that way I could get these to stick out just an extra 4 meters. Not the full foundation, just enough to add a little bit of depth. But even with those, it still felt like it just was a huge flat wall. So I just added some concrete pillars to go in that wall in between the windows. And the nice thing with that is it kind of brings it out a little bit. So with these, I just zooped it straight down. And that way the base of the building is just a little bit wider than, what the rest of it looks like. And I like the way that looks. And the great thing with using all of these half foundations is to round off the corners, I can just use these outer corner extensions. But this is where we'll get the oil pumping and get things started. But let's continue the tour first. So with these, I put some stairs down. So normally, if you put a ramp and stairs next to each other, the stairs are actually a little bit taller. So what I did was I just nudged these up by 1 meter. And now it gives you that look, which I like way better. And the reason these are short is half of them are clipped into this foundation. And by lifting it up, then you can kind of get away with that. That is something that I really wish we would get in this game, is like I would love a ramp that was half as wide. Only 4 meters instead of the full 8. I think it would just open up some more possibilities. Although everything in this game is just so gigantic, maybe we don't need smaller and smaller things. I don't know. I still think it would be nice. So we've got this floor, which really hasn't changed much. But now I've got my water extractor, but there is one more entrance. So if I come out this way, now there's a hyper tube. And here are the belts. And then I've just got my power cable dangling in the water. It's a good thing there's no sharks to eat my cables. But then I've got a hyper tube, and this will take me right back to the train station. I decided to just build a little platform, and my thinking is I can use this and add some more hyper tubes to whatever other future factories go out here, because I'm sure this won't be the last plastic and rubber factory. Let's go ahead and take the elevator to continue our tour. Next step, oil processing. And now we've got this floor. So as far as the machines go, nothing really changed, just a lot of more power cables and whatnot. Then I just added the catwalks all the way around. And then in each of the corners, there's some stairs that if you needed to, you could get down onto the main floor. But this way you should be able to easily navigate the whole factory. And then we've just got our 2 other refineries tucked over here in the corner. And then we can take our elevator to the final floor, plastic and rubber. There's a couple machines that are just really easy to hide the cables completely when you just want to clip it underneath straight through the machine and you'll just never see it. Refineries just aren't those machines, because even if you clip it kind of into the machine, there's so much of it empty down here that you end up just seeing a random wire. And really it shouldn't bother me because I pretty much have walkways that are 2 foundations above all the refineries anyways, and so I'm never going to see it. But I just don't really care for the way that it looks. What I normally do is just run the cable straight down. But if we delete this one, it also looks a little bit funny. I still like the way that this looks better, but it is just kind of standing out. So with this floor, I decided to try to cover things up, and I just used some beams. So the beams hide the actual wire, and then I just connected all of the beams together, or else they look a little bit funny with just the beams sticking up straight in front of the refineries. I think it blends in pretty well with the rest of the factory, and it hides my wires. So as far as the roofs and the smokestacks go, I'm just using the metal roofs right here to clip them into there. And then if we go up to the very top, so they basically just end right here, which means that the smoke is going to come through the top. So I just added some vents and some patterns onto the very top, and that's where all of the smoke should exit. And that right there is my plastic and rubber factory. Well, I think it's about that time. Before we get this turned on, I should note that the water extractors are all turned on. All of the water is pre-filled. But there's no canisters in any of the packages, so that's where the water ends right now. And that is the only thing I pre-filled. Normally I even pre-fill the crude oil, but this time I decided we'll just see how long the entire factory takes to get going. I'm still going to do the same thing, however, where I let the crude oil back up all the way back to the oil extractor. So even though I don't have any buffer storage, all of the pipes and machines should be completely full when I go to turn on the next process, and so that should give it enough of a buffer on its own. All right, let's start the stopwatch. And remember, I need the full 300 out of this thing. Now we're good. And there we go. So now everything is completely full with crude oil. To get everything else on and working, we just need the packaged water. And so for this, I'm just going to drop 100 in each one of these. And thankfully, there's only 8 packagers, so really this is pretty easy to do. But like I mentioned, if this was a much bigger system, I'd probably want to do it differently. And now that I have a buffer built up in the packagers of the fuel, now the fuel line is completely filled up and the refineries on either side of them are filled. All they're missing is either the rubber or the plastic. So what I'm going to do is just grab 3 stacks of plastic, split them all in half, and then for each of the refineries doing the recycled rubber recipe, I'm going to go ahead and just drop 100 in there. And there's 25 a minute of each headed to storage. Let's go ahead and go downstairs where the rest of it is sinking. It looks like we've got our 375 and 475. And those are just headed right out here to some temporary sinks. I am pretty sure I'm going to use all of this, so I didn't feel like I needed to place a permanent sink in here. Although who knows, I may end up with just a random amount of extra somewhere and I'll need one sink in here. But if that's the case, then I'll just tack it onto the side. I'm going to leave the train station really bare bones for now. But the next time I have a big project out here, I'll probably do some work and do a little bit more decorating for this one. Finally have plastic and rubber completely automated. I can finally clean up my last of the temporary setups and the plastic and rubber. I noticed in editing I could have definitely set up the canister loop better and used less machines. Feel free to tell me how you would have done it differently below. But that is going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for being here. If you have any thoughts on the videos being in 1440p, leave a comment below. The like button is probably the easiest way to let me know you want to see more. This being under an hour is actually on the shorter side for one of my videos now, but this felt like it should be a standalone video, and it being a little bit shorter made it easier to make sure I fixed all of my settings. In the next video, I'm going to finally build that electronics factory I've been talking about for so long, and one of the space elevator parts. So look forward to that, and thanks for watching.